Finish off our day before we head over for a beer. I'd also like to welcome Rob Pickering, who's the head of the AFL Technology, to the stage. And welcome him for me if you can.
Thank you.
You want to have a seat, Rob? Oh. Yeah, I'm a bit weary, so I'm gonna sit down. But we've obviously lucky enough to come on as a bit of a technology partner earlier this year. Well, I might start, Rob. Can you maybe give us a bit of a rundown of your background and how you got to be head of technology at the AFL?
Yeah, is that working? Maybe? No? We'll trade. It's a bit of a strange story. I didn't kind of end up wanting to work at the AFL. I didn't grow up supporting the AFL, so it's weird for me to have shown up at the AFL now. So I started out a long time ago, working in IT services, so helping to run an IT services firm, and sort of through that I've gone to a few different places. I spent a bit of time in essential utilities, a bit of time in digital education, 3 years at Cbus as the Chief Technology Officer, and now 3 years this week actually at the AFL as a GM of Technology and Chief Technology Officer. So it's weird to find myself here. I'm conscious that there are a long line of people that would probably crawl over my dead body to take my role. So I'm very cautious of my privilege in saying that, but it's fair to say that it's a great place to work, and it's pretty cool to have as your background from a work perspective a place like Marvel Stadium. It's one of the things that drew me to the role, which was the opportunity to make tech kind of real in a real sense. And there's only so often you can show your nieces and nephews CRMs and websites and they'd be excited about it, versus bringing them to the stadium and they get to see kind of in real life. And I still have them convinced, they're only 11 and 9, I still have them convinced that when the goal stings go off, I'd make it happen on my phone. That'll last for a few more years, but it's one of the cool upsides of being at the AFL.
And what does the head of technology, like the AFL is obviously the biggest sporting business in Australia, it's a massive business. What does the head of AFL Technology actually do?
Yeah, lots of meetings and emails, I think, is probably what most of us do, most likely. I think there's a few sort of struts to my job. One of them is working across our clubs and providing services and capabilities to our clubs. One of them is clearly working on Marvel Stadium as an asset. We have a goal here at Marvel Stadium of making it the most technologically advanced stadium in the Southern Hemisphere. I would have aimed higher for the world, but when you're dealing with billionaires who own stadiums in the US, it's a bit hard when they spent $7 billion on SoFi to kind of compete with that. So we've lowered our eyes a little bit, but we're kind of working on the stadium a lot of time. The third part is just what everyone else does that works in technology, making sure our help desk works, making sure applications are available, looking at cybersecurity, making sure the business can do the things they need to do. So in a lot of respects, it's no different to an everyday CTO job anywhere else I've worked, except you've got Marvel. And the other part that's quite interesting is just the profile that comes with the role. I'm very conscious that when things go wrong, when you work at the AFL, they go wrong very publicly, and our great friends in the press love to bag us incessantly when things go wrong. And so it's sort of all the things that you see in a normal IT career just amplified insofar as the publicity and focus that comes to you for that role.
Maybe touch on some of the hot topics at the moment. So how are you seeing, and the AFL must be a target for cybersecurity. So what are you seeing, and what are you protecting the business around at the moment?
Yeah, it's never been a more dangerous time to be in technology from a cybersecurity perspective, but you could have said the same thing 3 years ago. It just gets better and harder, and the attackers get better and better. And one of the things I think is really hard about cybersecurity is, as a protector, you have to be right 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You only need to be wrong for an hour or half an hour and you'll be compromised. And so that need to be literally 100% protective is really hard in a world that it's hard to be 100% available. And so the things that we're seeing continue to be the number one threats are people. So people attacks based on people. So typical phishing, and even more, particularly now with the prevalence of AI and large language models, really sophisticated phishing attacks on our people seeking to gain access to our environments. We see quite a lot of attacks focused at operational technology systems, so building management systems and otherwise, which are primarily nuisance attacks, but we don't know where they are in the future. But we have a good suite of capabilities, a good set of vendors that we work with. that means that I feel a little bit more comfortable at night than I would otherwise. I'm already bald. I can't go any more bald. So the technology, it doesn't stress me out any more than it can already. And I am only 41, although I look like 71. So that's already clearly taken a toll on me. But I think just practically it's the big shift for us has been the move away from protecting a walled garden of an office or a series of offices to your people sitting in homes, in living rooms, at their desks around Australia. And what does that do around how you manage your assets when all of them used to be sitting in an office, 200 metres away, and now they're all sitting in offices, or their own home offices around Australia. And in a lot of respects, that also changes the way they think about work. I don't know how you guys feel, but how often have you, at least for me anyway, you get an email at 8 o'clock, you pull your laptop out, you're sitting on the couch watching Netflix, and you're kind of just tapping away for an email that's come in. I'm not really in work mode. And I think that changes the way people's sort of threat radars are up. When you're at work, you're like, I really should be careful about that email. I'm thinking about it. I might be in a suit or a jacket. I've actually got my work brain on. When you pull your laptop out because you're watching the latest episode of the Beckham docuseries and you need to reply to something, your brain probably isn't as switched on as it would be at the office. And so it just changes the way people respond in those scenarios.
Just, I'll get into the fan experience stuff in a sec, but yeah, so one of the parts of our project was to get as many of the physical servers out of your environment, and single sign-on was a really key part of that as well. Can you maybe just touch on what the strategy is and is that part of that security strategy?
Yeah, it's kind of helped in the... I made a decision when I started here 3 years ago that we weren't going to have any infrastructure in the stadium or at the AFL. There's physical infrastructure, servers, stands, etc. A couple of reasons for that. One, I'm really tired of hearing from our IT teams that they need to patch something that takes the service offline. Like, it's kind of like we're a bit past that now. And so from a stadium perspective, we are the first stadium that I'm aware of in the world that is entirely public cloud. So every one of our servers and applications here at the stadium run in a public cloud environment. They do not run on physical infrastructure sitting here in a data center around here. That's a big change for us. There's a few reasons that we took that. One is security, clearly a really big one. The tools that you buy for security nowadays work best on cloud-native services, and so that ability just to deploy a standard set of security tooling across all of your environment that manages them in an effective way is easier in cloud. The second one is a speed thing. When I think about wanting to do a thing, I'm not constrained by, and now I need more storage, or, I've run out of ports on the switch, or, I need a SAN, or whatever. It's kind of like, if I could think about it, and I said this to my boss today, if you can dream it, we can do it. We're really only limited by imagination and money, as we all are. But so they're kind of the main reasons. It's the ability to innovate at speed, and the security overlay is why we've done that. But it's been the best decision. I've now done that at 2 businesses. The best decision we've made around the ability to just have the speed to market, the flexibility to do what we want to do both up and down, and the ability to secure that. With the same tool sets that you use across your corporate applications, you deploy to your OT and IT. So, been a great decision, and we've gone further than that. Like, I've sort of not just stopped at infrastructure as a service, but where as possible, we're moving to proper software as a service and platform as a service, like what we're doing with you guys. It's not enough for me just to go, I'll put it in a public cloud provider. I really don't want to think about the infrastructure at all.
Now let's get on the cool stuff. You spent a fair bit of money here. Obviously redeveloping the stadium. Can you take us through, there must have been a lot of planning and stuff. I'll just take it 3 years ago, that's probably what you were doing, yeah, planning for this?
Yeah, a little bit. I was lucky enough to come in kind of just as we had the money and the decision to go and do the rebuild of the stadium. We're working on a third of the stadium. I'm sure you've seen it around here today. So we're renovating a third of the stadium. That's about $250 million we've spent on that, renovating a third of the stadium. And a big chunk of that is tech. Outside of that, we've probably spent another $30 or $40 million on tech here across the stadium, across a whole variety of use cases, and doing some really cool stuff here, working with great partners like Telstra. We've deployed we were the world's first 5G mid-band stadium, we're the first 5G mid-band stadium with on the field of play coverage. So now if you're sitting out in the middle watching a Paul McCartney concert, you've got high-speed connectivity at your seat. Probably less relevant for Paul McCartney, but more relevant for Harry Styles, where everyone was TikToking their face off. But we kind of had we've made those investments in infrastructure to support that. We've rolled out nearly 30 kilometres of fibre around the stadium. We've got the Amazon Just Walk Out stores. Has anyone here given them a try yet?
I haven't, but that was one thing I was really interested to know. Like, obviously we've sort of seen information come through from the US where they're doing it in stores and things like that. But can you take us through a little bit of the runner technology?
Yeah, the runner technology is probably the coolest thing I've been involved in from a tech perspective in my career, and I like to think I've done some cool stuff. But when I started, actually, probably the entire reason I got the job at the AFL was because of Amazon. I've been a long time Amazon customer, and Amazon actually referred me to the AFL, so I kind of got my seat at the table for the interview from Amazon. But we wanted to build, and as I said earlier, we've got a vision that we're the most technologically advanced stadium in the Southern Hemisphere. That's all well and good when it's behind the scenes, but how do you have a visual representation of that as something that improves the fan experience? And so something like autonomous retail, where the concept of just walking up, tapping your credit card, walking in, grabbing whatever you need and walking straight out, and that transaction being, can be 14, 15 seconds for you to get a beer and walk out, is kind of what I think about when I'm at a stadium. And that friction-full experience is what stops people going to the stadium. I'm not worried about competing with the NRL. I'm not worried about competing with soccer. I'm worried about competing with people sitting at home on their couch watching the football, because the lines are short, the beer is cheap and cold, and probably you don't have to travel or park anywhere. So for us, how do we make that experience of getting in the stadium, getting around the stadium, getting what you need and getting back out of the stadium as efficient as possible? And clearly concessions are a big friction point. So we rolled that out earlier this year. We rolled it out in May 2023. We've had over 100,000 transactions go through that store. As at today, we've had 6 complaints of incorrect charging. I've looked at the video of those 6. I reckon at least 3 of them might be trying it on. They've said they've only got 3. They only bought 3 beers, but I can see them walking out with 4. So I'm going to call it 3. And when you think about what that technology is and how it works, it doesn't use facial recognition. It's literally just object recognition. There's about 40 cameras per store. To show somebody how that works is a pretty incredible thing. And my favourite story about the Amazon one, which I could talk about now that Gil isn't here anymore, because he won't fire me. When we went to open, we had an employee open day where we kind of had the employees come through, and we had 5 cents an item, basically. So you come and get lunch at the Just Walk Out store. And Gil had been bagging me for ages, telling me that it wouldn't work, telling me that he gamed it when he was in the US and that it's not going to work and it's going to cost all this money. And I'm like, just trust me, Gil, I think it'll work. And so he came over with 6 lawyers. Now that wasn't just, happened to have a meeting with them and brought them over. And they were standing out the front. And I tried to make a bet with Gil for $1,000 that it would work. And he's like, no, I can't bet. I've got the lawyers here. I can't bet with you. I'm like, you could bet with me. Like, they're fine. But he wouldn't. He said, but the deal was that if the items that he got with him and his party of 6 came out at the right amount, he would call me master for the entire month. And if they didn't, I would have to call him master for an entire month. Now, the prospect of that wasn't great for me, but the prospect of winning was quite exciting. And so he went through with his 6 lawyer friends. They got 19 items. And about a week later, I followed up with his EA and said, hey, Donna, how many items, what was the charge on the credit card? It should have been, 19 times 5 cents? It should have been 95 cents. And she said, I'll get back to you, Rob. And like about 3 days later, I'm like, hey, Donna, what do you reckon that charge was? And she's like, let me get back to you, Rob. And I sort of chased her up for about a week. And then I finally just went to the finance department and said, I just need to know this. And it turns out I was right, and he was delaying it because he was going on holidays for 2 weeks and only wanted to call me master for 2 weeks. But to his credit, he did call me master for the entire 2 weeks he was there. So what I would say is it works incredibly. It is a magical customer experience. My favourite part about the technology is, and this shows how crazy I am, for the first 5 or 6 games, I actually went and sat at the store for the very vast majority of the games and watched people come out. And my favourite part of it all is when people walked out the exit gate, they just stop and look around like they stole something. So they just be like, and then they get it and walk out. My second favourite part was I was helping at the kind of entry part. And a lady walked up and she scanned her credit card and she's like, this is terrible, this is crap, I don't know why you guys do this. What is this all about? It's absolutely atrocious. I'm like, sorry you feel that way. We're just trying something out and have a go at it. She scans the thing and walks in and grabs her stuff, and I've kind of got one eye on her while I'm helping someone else, and she circles around and I'm kind of watching her and I'm like, oh my God, she's coming back. She's going to give me a serve here. And I'm waiting and I'm watching and I'm waiting, and kind of gets around and she taps me on the shoulder, and I turn around like, what's going to happen here? And she's like, I just really wanted to apologise. I thought I had to like pay and you were checking my ID. She's like, that was absolutely fucking incredible. And I'm like, wow, because like, there's two parts. One, she obviously felt embarrassed about giving me a spray, but then she thought, she had it in her, it was so cool to her that she came back around to kind of let me know how cool it was to her, which would have been, I imagine, hard after you've given me a 30-second spray for it. So it's great to see that cool interaction of technology and customer experience.
Yeah, I think once you start working with the AFL, you work out very, very quickly it's all about fan experience. What other cool ideas have you rolled out or about to roll out around the fan?
Yeah, we've got plenty in the pipeline. We'll roll out a new Marvel Stadium app in the next couple of months. There's two parts to that which I think are really cool. We'll have the first in the world augmented reality wayfinding here at the stadium, which is you put you in your seat, you hold your phone up, you move it around, and it'll tell you how to get to your seat. It'll sort of take you to your seat via the camera on your phone, which is pretty cool. The other part I think is really cool, which is in your area, Austin, is the ability to interact our app with our parking capability. So you can pre-book parking, QR in, open the gates up and walk through. There's some really cool technology in that area. And for us, again, it's about removing those friction points, those bits that are harder than they would ordinarily need to be to get you into and out of the stadium quickly. But I'm really excited about both of those things launching. Our app is kind of imminent, but it's got those two big bits of capability in it. But the app becomes a launch pad for us to do a whole lot of other stuff. So it's the way that we'll embed the next lot of customer experiences go into our app. And we're looking at things like putting a camera up on the gantry, or several cameras up on the gantry, so that you could put in your seat and take a photo of you from the cameras up on the gantry, and so you get a picture of you and your mate sitting in your seats in a way that looks like someone's taking it for you, but you're via an app. And one other really cool thing, which is about, we want to make the stadium the most technologically advanced stadium, but also the most accessible stadium. And so we're doing some great work with Telstra on this technology called Field of Vision, and it looks a bit like an Etch-a-Sketch. For those, we look pretty old here, so I think we're all okay to know what an Etch-a-Sketch is. When I say that to like an 18-year-old, I don't know what it is, but it's a bit of an Etch-a-Sketch. It looks like a wedding ring on it, and the diagram of a football field basically. And using cameras on the gantry, it can follow along the football on this tablet and provide haptic feedback to vision impaired people, saying, so there's a goal, there's a change of possession, there's a free kick. And so we demonstrated that at the middle of this year, and we'll roll it out completely at the start of next year. So vision impaired people can come here, they can put the radio on and listen to the game in real time and follow along with their hands as the ball moves around the stadium. That's a cool use of technology.
Yeah. I think working with Telstra, integrating the parking system, and that's the other side of our integration. We talked about integrating into third-party systems like the SKIDATA system and the building security systems and the like we talked about earlier with Gary. But being able to absorb our technology into your app gives you that control of that user experience, and using obviously the technology that we've built in, the function that we've built from a parking point of view. But my understanding, event apps and stadium apps have been hard people to get them to download. But so obviously you're putting some stuff in here that people are going to want to download the app, right?
Yeah, I think, and as you look through your phone at the apps that you've got on there, there's probably 30% of them you use every day. They're your banking apps, they're your shopping apps, they're things that you use every day. Probably another 30% of stuff that you use once in a blue moon, maybe your superannuation fund or other stuff. And then there's probably 40% of apps that you downloaded once and use it and never used again. And that's the risk that you run when you put an app in place, I think, that kind of there's not a sufficient value exchange that you put in place an app and people download it once, use it and go, no, I mean, it's fine, but I don't really want to use it anymore. What we're trying to do is just make sure that the value exchange is very strong in the app, and the capability there is something that takes the best advantage of an app as a format, but really is a companion app to the stadium, rather than just be something that's like, oh, we'll tell you, the list of restaurants we've got here. How do you get there? Can you pre-order? All the things that kind of make that a better experience is what we'll seek to build out. But it is, I would say, even internally, the number one skeptic of this is our CFO, who's kind of like, I just don't think it's going to work. And I'm like, well, look, we've got to try. We can't have the world's most technologically advanced, Southern Hemisphere's most technologically advanced stadium and no app. So we're going to give it a try. I think with some of the stuff that we've got, we'll be successful. But the proof will be in the pudding. If we can make it have a good story and a compelling story for people to download our app and use our app, then they'll continue to do that. And I think we're working on that, and we'll have something cool on that early next year.
You talked about SoFi, and I don't know if Malcolm's in the room, but Pam, an Australian company we went through a PropTech accelerator with, did some wayfinding stuff at SoFi. But you talked about the money they've spent and the technology they've spent. Is there anything there you would love to have that you maybe Gil didn't allow you to the budget to put for?
Look, I think we'll get a lot of the core technology that SoFi has. Some of the cool stuff they're able to do, and some of the things they've got at SoFi are things like if you walk up to some of those big screens we've got at the back there, then 3 players from your team will gather around you and you take a photo, and it looks like you're literally you've got 3 of your favourite players around you on a screen. Some of that really cool advanced stuff is quite good. But it's really hard to compare yourself with the US stadiums. There's a few real material differences. One, in the US, it's generally one stadium, one team. So you can skin the stadium exactly as you want. Here we've got 5 tenant AFL clubs. We've got a tenant cricket club. We do concerts, we do conferences, we do events. So you can't just kind of take an approach that I can make this as Carlton specific as I might want it to as a Carlton fan. It's got to actually work in a way that the stadium can have personalities that change all the time. The other part is the average ticket cost. The average ticket cost to go to a game here in Australia is, between $25 and $70, depending on where you are. The average ticket cost to go to a game at SoFi is well north of $500, and season tickets are up around the $20,000 and $30,000 mark. So you've got a different clientele that are there and a different amount of money you can invest as a result of it. So we need to make the investments that we make need to have that lens to it, but also a lens that the people that are coming to the footy, there's everyone here from 8-year-old digital natives to 80-year-old people that just want to come and see their team play. And how do you make it work so that no matter who you are, you get the best possible experience in the stadium? And that's a bit different to the US. Not entirely different, but a bit different to the US.
You think the ticket pricing is expensive? Try the parking at SoFi. It's out of control.
Yeah, $35 here doesn't look too bad when you look at the US pricing.
I think I believe I was in LA a month ago, and they were talking about how they were parking in people's driveways for a couple $100 to go to a game of football. Look, I might go to the audience, Rob, and get. I'm sure there's a heap of questions. You've got the head of technology at the AFL. Is anyone want to kick me off? There we go. Crickets. Here we go. Thanks, Richard.
Do you mean broadcast cameras? No, they're with our broadcast partner, Channel 7. What's the complaint? I'm happy to pass it on. Because so you mean the score review cameras? No, I unfortunately am in charge of those, so you can blame me. You know what? I do a bit of this. I do a bit of this sort of stuff. I'm lucky enough to do a bit of this stuff. And the number one question I get is score review. And I took it over at the start of last year, and I fucking wish I hadn't, to be honest. But it's fair. It's a couple of things on that. It's a really hard physics problem to solve. It. I spent a lot more time thinking about this than I'd like to be honest. But I'll give you the quick debrief. If you want to talk about it, I'll spend 3 hours bending your ear about it later. AFL is one of those weird games. It doesn't matter whether it's crossed the line or not. That's just one of the metrics that matter. It's whether it touches a foot, whether it touches a boot, where it touches a boot. And we have incredibly big grounds. And one of the other things, and I don't know if you know this, you maybe do know this, I didn't know it before I started the AFL. No 2 AFL grounds are the same. So if you're in Baghdad, Bosnia or Beirut, all basketball courts are exactly the same. If you're here or at MCG, the stadiums are completely different. The sizes are different. They're wider, they're narrower, they're longer, whatever it happens to be. And so the solution you deploy, and we have to deploy it everywhere, and you have to deploy it at every ground we play at. So we play at nearly 30 grounds in a given year. So you've got to have a technology that does that. Now, that is extremely expensive. So if you look at what it would cost to put in super slow-mo cameras at here, it's about $1 million a year for our ground. You times that by 30, it becomes a pretty big proposition. So it's quite hard to do and not always that instructive, because if you've got those super slow-mo cameras trained at the goal line, that's fine. But what if the ball looks like it's been touched off the boot on the 50? You actually can't see that. So it's quite a hard problem. The other problem is not all of our stadiums are bold stadiums. So bold stadiums are easier because you've got places to hang the cameras. You go to Sydney Cricket Ground, there's areas that there aren't. You go to some of the other grounds we play at, GMHBA or at Heritage Bank Arena and Gold Coast Suns, there's no grandstand to hang them off, or there's only grandstands to hang some of them off. So it's actually quite a hard problem to solve for. I can spend hours spending a year on it. The point is we're looking at ways we can do it better. We're reasonably confident in the technology solutions we have in place around the ability to ingest that video. Just about getting cameras in the right place to make it easier for our officiating team to make a call.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to be wrong either way, because if it wasn't for my team's side, then you're wrong.
And the other part is everyone loves to criticise us anyway. Like a great example of this is, I won't talk about the Adelaide one today, the Adelaide one this year. I hope there's no Adelaide supporters in here, but the Tom Lynch alleged goal the year before that stopped the Tigers making the final. Like, I've got the video of that. It is clearly a point. It's actually more a point than it is a goal. Like, there's that much ball over the thing. But we've kind of taken a decision, for right or wrong, that if we release footage when we're right, we'll have to release footage when we're wrong. And kind of, it's hard to then to draw that line. So it's a blanket kind of rule of we're not releasing the super slow-mo footage we have. But broadly, we're pretty right. But it's hard to say anything other than we're right, because if you don't, you've got to start surfacing footage, and then it's a problem. So that's the challenge.
And I take it there's no experts on
None at all.
this technology.
None at all. It would be the number one conversation, even with my mates. I'll show up to the pub on a Saturday afternoon, and I'll just get roasted over score reviews. So,
No doubt. Alice?
More of a philosophical question, I suppose, but 5 to 10 years down the track, what do you envisage fan engagement through technology looking like?
yeah, I think there's two lenses to that. There's an in-stadium experience where I think that we'll see more of things like if you want an alternative commentary stream, you'll be able to get that from your seat. If you want to watch different angles of the game, you'll be able to have a companion kind of second device that you can watch the angle that you've got and then another different angle if you want to see something else. I suggest it's going to be more about making more parts of the game available in stadium. When you talk about the broader fan experience, one of the things that all sporting codes do badly, and I'd say we're getting there, but we're not there yet, and I don't think any sports are there even globally, is understanding how big of a fan you are and delivering content to you that's relevant to you for your fandom. So we have, at the AFL, and it's a sort of a bugbear of mine, and we're working through it, is we super serve content to a really small slice of our audience. Like, they're kind of, I would call them footy nuffies. That's not the technical term for them. There's a better term for them. But yeah, if you love footy, we'll give you content all day long that is like super detailed about the game. But if you sit on the periphery of that, or you're a new fan, or you're someone that maybe isn't as into it as others, our content is kind of not as good for you in that space. And so the ability to generate content based on not someone like you, but exactly you, is a really interesting way to drive fandom, I think. And we're just getting to the point now where we're operationalising the data we have about our fans to deliver better fan experiences. But in 5 or 7 years, that will be much, much better. And, it's things like, and I think about things like this, which aren't far away, and we could do them pretty quickly, in the next few years, is people that engage with our AFL fantasy platform, they're our most engaged people. If you're going to play fantasy, you've got to be really engaged. You're going to buy and sell players. It's quite involved, for those of you that don't know anything about it. We could send you a personalised match report about your players at the end of that round that's just for you, and some suggestions on what you might do with them based on what's coming up. Like, that is not that hard to do from a large language model perspective coming up. And so there's some of those things that increase and deepen fandom that I think are where we go. The use of data more broadly, not to make us more money, but just to bring people closer to the game, is where I think all sports will go to. Because in a model where you've got many different competing eyeballs, many different people competing for eyeballs, your ability to drive affinity and fandom is critical.
Angelique?
Thanks so much for that, Rob. How do you see live sports and games and stadiums and all the augmented reality stuff you do here compete with what's in the metaverse, what the kids are doing with, for example, Extreme World, the creator economy around that, and having your live sports compete effectively with what's in the metaverse?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and congrats on your win before.
You don't need to. Go there. We'll hear about it anyway.
Congratulations. But look, I think it's an interesting question. Again, we need to fish where the salmon's swimming, basically. So our next generation of fans aren't watching our Instagram or reading our match reports on afl.com.au. They're playing Roblox and Minecraft with their friends, or often they're gaming while they're streaming with their friends on Discord or on Twitch or whatever. And so we've taken some early steps into the metaverse. We've got an NFT product that we're early in there, so in the Web3 space. We're early on that, and I think the market and the kind of audience is still catching up to that. But we're thinking much more about how we deliver content, particularly for kids. We don't have a kids tagged product or a product that which kids can get engaged with outside of our AusKick program, which is far and away the most successful kids engagement tool that we have. But we are doing more and more work about how do we deliver content to where the kids are rather than where we expect them to be. It's just very hard because we're kind of right at that precipice of that becoming something that's, I'm going to call it real in inverted commas, real and at scale, than today where it's still a bit pipe dreamy. It's interesting but pipe dreamy. So we want to be early on that, but really we're focused on making sure we've got content for kids that bring them closer to the game, from day one. And it's a real focus of ours. We, like a lot of sports, have an aged membership group. People are getting older. The kids aren't coming in to replace them at the same scale because they just don't consume membership and fandom in the way that their parents did. And that's a challenge for all sports, and it's one that we're working through, but there's no easy answers for it at the moment.
We had Tommy Greer earlier from the southeast Melbourne Phoenix talk about their product as an entertainment product. Do you see the AFL as the same?
Well, I think we've always been an entertainment product, but a bit different to many other sporting leagues in the world. The AFL has carriage of the sport from grassroots all the way through, from NAB AusKick all the way through to Masters football. And so our job isn't just to maintain the elite men's and women's game, it's to make sure we grow the game through it. So many leagues around the world are only focused on how do you maximise the elite sport. We've got to think much broader than that, and we do think much broader than that. I would say the number one thing I've been asked more than a few times, what do you spend time at around the executive table? And I'll tell you what we spend time at. It's game development. It's like that's the number one focus of things we spend time on, which has very little to do with the elite game, but it's where we involve most of our efforts on, because it's a bit of a flywheel. You get people interested in playing the game, and they'll be lifelong fans, and they'll build communities, and they'll enjoy playing football, watching football, experiencing football. And so when we spend that time on game development, that I think helps. It's not an entertainment product then, but the format of the game from an entertainment perspective becomes real as you get to the elite games. And I think we have the best product in person in the world to watch. AFL is one of the best sports that I've ever seen. And coming from a non-AFL watching background, there's nothing really better than watching AFL in person. I think it's not as good on television. No knock to our broadcast partners who we love, but it's a sport that was built to watch in person. Very different to NRL, which I grew up watching and playing. It's a sport that is much better on TV than in person, and so it's also that line between entertainment in stadia and entertainment on broadcast.
Yeah, I think this is going to pay me to actually say it, but I went to the Collingwood prelim at the G. Yeah, with Jesse.
Are you a Collingwood fan or?
I'm a Cats fan, and took Jesse.
You've had a good year. I mean,
We're going right, mate. I'm not stressed about that. But what an amazing game to start with, and I think the grand final was probably another amazing game. But I compared it to I went to a German soccer league game with Gary and Daniel. What was the name of that team? Yeah, Dortmund. Unbelievable atmosphere. 80,000 Dortmund fans going sick just after COVID. They hadn't been. The first time the stadium was full after that. But that was probably the closest I'd seen to one team, one club atmosphere at the MCG, and the atmosphere was absolutely electric. And you just don't get that. You wouldn't have got that through the TV, I'm sure.
No, I think it's again, it's a different experience. When you come to the football, it's all about the experience of being at the football, and you're there with your tribe. It's very tribal, right? You're around the people that are there, and often for a lot of our fans, they've sat in the same seat for 30 years, and their parents sat in the row behind them, and it becomes a thing that you do with your family. And a good friend of mine the other day, actually, who I ran into at a party, I hadn't seen him for a little while, but he's a Carlton fan like myself, and he showed me a video that he took that his sister had cut into like a bit of a mega mix of videos of kind of them going to the Carlton finals through the period, sort of the highs and lows of it. And there's, 3 generations of family there just losing their mind at the Carlton-Melbourne game. And you go, well, that's the cool thing about, from an entertainment perspective, is that connection between the fans and the game that I really don't see in other sports. The AFL is the 4th most attended sport in the world. German football is the 3rd, so that makes sense. But a lot of that comes from that you're just going to the footy because you want to be there with your people and to cheer on a common cause. And there's something that's really, it's a bit emotional even about that you just don't see. And you watch, grown men and women after Collingwood won the grand final just in tears. I walked along Brunton Avenue watching people just in absolute tears. I mean, it's crazy because you're Collingwood fans, but it's quite, it's that people feel it that strongly that it's quite cool to see, and it's a responsibility that lays quite heavily, I think, on us. When I joined the AFL, the second conversation I had was with Steve Hocking, who's now the CEO of Geelong, who was the EGM of football at the time, and he said, your job for the time you're at the AFL is to make the game better than you found it, and that's really something I think about a lot when I come to work. It's like you've got the carriage of something that people care so much about. So for all the kind of jokes I make about getting shit about score review, I have the carriage of that for the fans of the game who are so passionate about it. That's a responsibility that you've got to feel very keenly. And I know that a lot of my peers, all of my peers, feel the same way about it.
I'll come back to you, Daniel. I just wanted, I wanted to talk to you about an experience I had. I was in San Diego grand final. So it was 9:30 and we were looking for somewhere to watch it. And I found the San Diego Lions football team. Cruised out to a place called Claremont with a couple of blokes from Claremont in Perth, and bought a ticket and put some money into the San Diego Lions AFL team, and watched the game with 150 AFL supporters, 100 expat Aussies. How are you growing the game in those sort of areas, and what does the AFL do to promote, internationally, because it's really not an international sport?
Yeah, it's not, and we've had goes at it before. We play games in China. We clearly have, a whole lot of passionate expat Aussies that play. Or I know it's really big through Southeast Asia. I've got a friend who lives in Cambodia that plays for the Cambodian national team. There's a whole cohort of people that have come around playing the game and watching the game. It's not that it's not a focus of ours, but it's a hard game to get into rules-wise and stuff. And so it's it takes a bit to get there. And so I think it's going to be a sustained effort over a long period of time. I think it's fair to say, and I wouldn't be speaking out of school here, I don't think it's our number one focus to grow the game internationally. We're really focused on growing the game nationally. We're the biggest sport in Australia by any metric. NRL people can argue with me later, but we've got you covered. And within probably the next 5 years, which would have been unthinkable 15 years ago, we will beat Brisbane. We'll beat the NRL in participation in Brisbane. That's the focus. The focus is on a footy in every home. That doesn't mean every home has a Sharon. That's a pretty good idea, though, but it'd be quite expensive to send out a Sharon to every home. But it means that someone plays, or they talk about it, they're interested, they watch it, they've got an eye to it. We think we can do a pretty good job of that in areas that are currently we're not fully penetrated in, places like Western Sydney, places like Central Queensland. And we've committed through this last year to spend 10% of our revenue on game development across Australia. And what that will mean is the sheer weight of money will get us there over NRL in the next 5 years. And so that's our focus.
And that's been the strategy for round one, with getting a few more games in interstate round one, and not playing Essendon.
I'm not.
I know
The fixture one's a hard one. I've had, again, lots of feedback about the fixture. I'm not responsible for the fixture, but I've had lots of feedback from everyone that I know about the fixture. Particularly my wife, who's a Carlton fan and a traditionalist who hates the idea of not going to a Carlton-Richmond game as a first game and is constantly into me about the daytime, nighttime grand final thing. Like, we had a conversation at exec that she overheard, and she said, if I hear you support a Twilight grand final again, I'm going to divorce you. So she was very, very strident, very traditional in her approach around football. Look, we are committed to growing the game in all geographies. We have kind of complete penetration in many of the heartland areas of our traditional places that we play. If you go to Hawthorn, your kid probably plays AFL. Like that's pretty much taken. But if you go to Tarneet, there's a good chance that you don't watch it and you're not interested. And so we want to grow the game through that. And we think there's plenty of opportunity without looking to international markets.
Daniel, you had a question. I'll come back to that because I've got three.
Probably just goes on from what you're just talking about there. I'm quite heavily in juniors and masters in Brisbane in that scene. And one of the big things that we're doing with QAFL is the increase in AFLW. That's probably been the biggest growth in AFL, especially getting into the homes over the last sort of 2-3 years. What are we doing, or what are you guys doing in regards to with technology and the fan engagement with the AFLW side?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, pretty much all of our growth and participation has come from women and girls playing football. That's an incredible success story of ours that we're all immensely proud of. We have taken a bit of a different view to W, I think, in general, which is more about we think that as a code, AFL, the men's AFL, is I don't know how to put this any better. I think if you started from scratch at designing men's AFL, you might not design the way that it is today. You probably stay a bit closer to the community, play at more community grounds, have a more festival feel, have people kind of come from the immediate. This is such a spectacle, and I never want to diminish that, but W has a real joy to it that I don't think we want to. We don't want to lose. There's a joy to W that playing at more community-style grounds, giving it a more of a festival atmosphere, and having all of the things that go with that contribute to that to being a great game. Even the W athletes, I think, are so much more interesting than men's athletes. Like, have you listened to an interview with a male player? Like, it's like, all credit to the boys. We had a great day. We're focused on it week by week. But you talk to the women players, they're actually interesting. They're real people. They've got great stories. There's something there that no one wants to lose. And so there's not a draw to make the AFLW more like AFL from a technology perspective. It's more about how can we maintain the heart of that joy and kind of fun that is in W and make sure people feel that when they come to a game. So it's more like food trucks and families than it is about stadiums and concessions.
We might, Tom, quick.
Just the last one on technology, AFLW sort of blending that. Thinking about concussions, like bringing girls and women into the sport and some of the stuff going on globally around concussion technology, is that a concern? Is it on the radar? Is that your remit or is it elsewhere?
It's not in my area, and I need to be a bit careful at what I say about it because it's clearly a contentious area. What I'd say is concussion is one of our key strategic risks. That's not public, like it's in that everyone knows that. We feel much better positioned than many other codes on that front, and it's about how do we make sure we continue to protect people into the future. But it's not. It's a risk for every professional sporting code. And we continue to be the focus of a lot of that because we're the biggest, to be frank.
Man, should have got 6 weeks.
We might finish up there. I'd like everyone to thank Rob for giving up his time.